The Bones and Bobbins podcast is now on Patreon. Would you like to access bonus episodes, digital extras, exclusive merch, and more? Join us in the Curiosity Shop at patreon.com/Bones and Bobbins.
Your generous support helps make the show happen and will also earn you our very eternal gratitude and entry into our private Patreon-only Facebook group.
Ooh, fancies.
Mm-hmm. In a dusty old shop on a forgotten old street, you'll find two witches with books 3 boxes deep. Next to rusty old needles and faded red thread, you'll come in for yarn, but leave with pigments instead. Whether poisons or patterns, we're always discreet, where creepy and crafty and morbidity meet. Welcome to the Bones and Bobbins podcast. Hello, morbid makers. We are your slightly creepy,
Mildly disconcerting,
somewhat sinister,
delightfully discomposed,
opaquely odd,
merrily morbid,
marvelously misanthropic hosts. I'm Haley from Red Handled Scissors and the Very Serious Crafts podcast.
Hi, I'm Natali from Uber Dark Designs, an official murderino maker.
Fancy!
Yay!
So, today we're talking about corsets.
Which are.
There are so many things that are corsets and so many ways to use them that honestly it's kind of an overwhelming subject.
It is. It is. I remember my first time in a corset.
Oh
yes. So I was a senior in high school. And I've always been a rather buxom gal. And at that age, actually starting in 5th grade when I got boobs before anyone else, that's when the whole body shaming came in. My maiden name is Oakwitz, and all of 5th grade it became Oaktits. So it was, good times. Good times. Oop. Are we back? Mm-hmm. Okay. So 5th grade. Not fun with boobs.
No, I can't imagine that it would be.
No.
I didn't get them until college, and I thought they were great fun.
Right.
When that happened. My freshman year of college, there was a lot of joy.
Yeah. So I was always just kind of weird about them and self-conscious about them. And then we did a play called The Liar. And I got cast as the lead female. And it was a period timepiece. And I had to wear a corset. Which seemed super fun. And I was all for it. Until I realized that there is a giant chunk of this play that took place with me standing on a balcony leaning over to talk.
Oh no.
So I cannot tell you to this day, I've been in many plays and productions, and that is the one that I do not remember most of the lines from, because part of me was just like, don't let them fall out, don't let them fall out, don't let them fall out, because I had this nightmare of one just going blink.
I mean, and that happens.
It does. So,
yeah.
I still, when I was not leaning over the balcony, I still danced around in my corset and the dress, and I loved it. But yeah, it was terrifying leaning over the balcony. And the young lad I was talking to at the bottom of the balcony, I could see.
Was probably like, let him fall out, let him fall out.
Please, let me see one. So that's my first time wearing a corset. Hi.
Hi.
Ooh,
Hello.
it is acting up today. It is not like boob talk.
It doesn't like sexy talk at all, it would seem.
Yeah.
But, yes, so you were saying.
So,
The
yeah.
lad below you.
Yeah, he was super excited about the whole corset. And I was
Imagine he was.
not as much. Yeah.
My first corset wearing, well, it was also in high school, but I was your local teenage goth.
Nice.
And so my mother bought me a ridiculous, it was vinyl, like made to look like fake leather corset.
Oh.
And I wore it as a shirt.
Nice.
Yep. And every time, like, my dad or my stepdad would fuss a bit about it, she would be like, "What? It's not like she's having sex." And then I would sashay out. And I wasn't, for the record. The thing that scared me most in the world was the thought of getting pregnant and having to not go to college.
Yeah,
So-
that's good contraception right there.
Well, the look on my dad's face, my cop dad's business face, was not a thing I wanted to see.
Oh, I bet not.
But I wore lots and lots of corsets. I wore them, just as day wear, but also in Rocky Horror and flouncing around the goth clubs of the early aughts in Detroit. Oh dear. City Club. There's a place in my heart for it. But, whew, I can't believe, like, why would I wear a vinyl thing? Oh, I'm just, whatever. When you're young, I guess you're willing to put up with a bit more boob-related discomfort.
Right. You don't know any better then, to be honest.
No. Well, you know what, though? I kind of wish that I had a corset currently, because you'd know what I could put in there. See, we had a tropical storm over the weekend,
You did.
and I got kittens.
Kittens!
2 kittens happened to coincide with the arrival of that tropical storm. And they are babies. They're 9 weeks old.
Oh.
And so they're they're not old enough to be away from their mom, really. And so if I had a corset, I would unlace the top and stick the kittens right in there and
Nice!
just have kitten boobs. It'd be great.
Corset kittens!
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Oh, I am here
So-
for it, 1,000%.
Yeah. I have a friend who's a kitten rescuer who definitely sticks kittens in her bras. Because she's a neonatal kitten rescuer, so if they have
yeah.
to be kept warm and she's got to go somewhere,
Right.
like she got bottle babies in
Yep.
her bra or in the pocket of her overalls or whatever, she's always got a kitten somewhere.
That's fun. I want to be her. I want to carry kittens like that.
I don't think you do, though. There's a lot of sad when it comes to kittens.
Oh,
that
yeah. Yeah, that I couldn't
But she's
handle.
awesome. I don't know if she listens. Maybe she does. Hi, Maddie. Maddie.
Hi, Maddie.
Does, Badass Quilters Society. And
Bless
she's
you
awesome.
for your kitten love.
Yes. But yeah. So boobs on display, or
Boobs
not on
and
display.
kittens. Boobs and kittens are like 2 of the greatest inventions on earth.
I agree completely.
Who
I'm
do-
really glad that we're
Seriously.
combining these things.
Seriously.
Who doesn't like boobs and kittens?
Right? No one I want to know.
Exactly.
Yep. So, do you know who I do like to know? I like to know our Curiosity Shop members.
Oh,
Yeah.
I like to know them too.
Yeah, I think we should take a quick break to thank all of our fantastic Curiosity Shop members over on Patreon and give
Yes, please.
a totally normal, not at all creepy welcome with a dash of boobs and kittens to our newest members.
Because that's not creepy at all.
Right. Joshua Shoemaker, who should have been on last week's episode. And I have known Joshua since he was a tiny lad. In fact, once upon a time, I babysat Joshua.
Well.
Right. And he's one of my favorite humans. Kim Harrison, who I did not babysit, but I'm sure Kim is absolutely amazing. Kristen Stickles. Welcome, Kristen. And our newest is Heather Santillano.
Hello.
So hello
You're
and
the best.
Absolute best.
Yes, and we would totally go explore hidden old graveyards in the woods with you. That's how much we love you.
Yes, kittens optional.
No, they're not. They're definitely going to be kittens.
They're
Creepy dolls are optional.
True. Also,
Well, they're not optional for me currently, as there are 2 frozen Charlotte dolls in a package sitting right behind me right now.
I'm very excited.
And for those of you who have listened to our dolls episode, you may or may not be delighted to know that I bought a set of them, and one for me and one for Natali. And they have been here for about a week probably, just under a pile of selenite. Because even the box is terrifying.
It is a wee bit, isn't it?
Yep. I'm going to send that box to you when I send yours.
She's like, here, take the
You
box.
can have the box.
I'll take the box. Maybe it will appease the entity that is.
Oh no, I don't want to make the other one mad.
You know what? We've managed to talk about boobs for a while, and it's been okay. So we're on a roll.
Well, all right. So yeah, I guess dolls, right? Dolls are optional.
Dobbs and
kittens are
Hodge,
not.
yeah.
And boobs, well, they're kind of attached.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Although it would be fun.
Or sometimes not.
True. That's true.
No, we're here for you if your boobs are not attached all the time.
Right. Absolutely. All boobs are welcome.
Hooray, boobs. Or not boobs.
Whatever.
Wow.
Yay.
This is taking a turn.
It is taking a turn.
Yes. Wait. I was trying to figure out where we were in the list of things, and I found it now.
Yay.
Yeah, we're not exactly the most focused today.
No, it has been a week, and I think that anyone that's listening probably has had a week in and of itself.
Yeah, it's been a week for everybody I know.
Right.
Yeah.
So should we talk about some corsets?
Let's strap in.
All right.
Yeah, I'm done.
Is that what you put down there?
Lace it up.
Yes, sirree. So, I've learned that the corset is probably one of the most misunderstood garments in the fashion history. Like, so the very look of it kind of screams medieval torture device to some. Others, sexy.
I mean, it's kind of hot.
It is.
Although,
And there's
my portion of this conversation will deal with a pretty close to medieval torture device.
Mwahaha.
Wahaha.
So the history is much more complex and murky than I anticipated.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing that is pretty much universal is that the corset represents a fundamental shift in the entire concept of clothing and tailoring.
Yeah.
Instead of shaping clothes to the body, as has been throughout time, the body began to form to the fashionable shape of clothing worn. So,
Yes.
Denia Bruna, who is the curator of the Bard Graduate Center's exhibition Fashioning the Body, wrote in an essay for the exhibition catalog, "There is no natural body, but only a cultural body. The body is a reflection of the society that presided over its creation." So that's really
I always
super
think
fun.
that's interesting.
Right?
Like, when you look at old photos, like, of, like, my grandparents in the 50s, like, their bodies don't look like mine.
Right.
But they're not necessarily doing anything to make their bodies look like they do.
Right.
I always find that to be fascinating, or like the 20s or the 30s, or like different silhouettes.
Right.
Like bodies somehow manage to look different in different eras.
Right.
And it's probably perception.
Exactly.
But-
Yeah. And yeah, it's so... It totally... I wouldn't have thought that the topic of corsets would hit me on a deeper philosophical level. But it totally did. And, you know, and corsets were pretty much created to mold the body and shape it and disguise it into whatever figure was deemed attractive and aesthetic at any given time. So the origin of the word corset, and actually the creation of the corset itself it's interesting because it's also super murky. So the origin describes a fitted female undergarment. According to Dr. Joan Evans, in her book Fashion and Underwear from Babylon to Bikini Briefs, in medieval times, the word denoted some kind of cloak that was ironically for men, and that it wasn't until the turn of the 19th century that corset was used to describe the controversial undergarment. Instead, it was referred to as stays, which is pretty. So there's times when we talk about stays, and it is a corset, but it wasn't called corset till later.
Well, doesn't it matter how high it is, whether it covers the breasts or not?
And that's the thing, is that it's shifted. The actual, so much like there's different styles of bras, the corsets shifted with what the aesthetic was, and with what your station was. So the first known recorded examples of a corset, or something like it, dates back to the Minoan people in Crete, Greece.
Wow.
Yeah, images painted on ancient pottery shows both men and women wearing these form-fitting belts around the waist, complete with vests that have leather rings or straps. And the Minoan civilization was a Bronze Age Aegean civilization, that was like way back in the BC days. Now the true origin of the corset is pretty unclear, because there's different variations of it in different cultures, and like in Italy it was worn as an undergarment, and so we're gonna try to get through this as concise and not go into like all the bajillion different ones. So I'm trying to keep
and we aren't fashion historians.
Right.
So
I'm trying
to gloss over.
Right. I'm trying to keep
a lot of things.
Yeah. I'm going for a pretty straightforward through the centuries. A brief down through the centuries. So we're going to start our historical tale at the 15th century, because that's where like better recordings regarding corsets have begun. Now, during that time, a corset-like garment,
and also writing,
right? That's helpful.
Well, writing that has been kept.
Right.
Books.
Not on a cave wall. So a corset-like garment called a cotte was first made popular in France. Now, it had a similar shape to the corsets that we know today, but it didn't provide much coverage to the bust. It had a square neckline and white set straps to reveal the upper breast and collarbones.
Yes.
And then came Agnes Sorel, who was mistress to Charles VII of France. And she changed the history of the corset when she wore a gown in the French court, which exposed her breasts, like completely tits out. And then
that was a thing for a while, like having like the tops of the nipples visible.
Right. So then a trend began. And
Like, you couldn't show an ankle,
No.
but an areola,
Right.
bring it on.
Exactly. So this trend began, and then French women started to open their corsets to reveal their breasts. A little later, another trend started showing the lower back, so women wore short corsets that would cut open their dresses in the back to display it.
Huh.
So then we move along to the 16th century, where Catherine de Medici...
Wait, that's in the 1500s?
Yeah. That was... Yeah. So then...
Well, I guess we hadn't gotten quite as prudish as we would.
Right. Yeah. We do get prudish, don't we? So moving along, 16th century, Catherine de Medici, who is often credited with introducing corsets to France via Italy, banned thick waists at court. And that meant that wealthy women in public view were required to wear corsets all the time. Otherwise, you could not get invited to the parties. So these 16th century corsets were laced at the front and the back, and they had a decorative panel in the front and the back called a stomacher that concealed the laces. Spanish versions of these used wooden or bone rod called a busk in the front to create a flat shape, while the English Tudor corset used iron corset covers, because, iron. Whereas,
Like you do.
right? Whereas Germany and Italy still rocked a less rigid style at the time. It was pretty much made out of like quilting to make it stiffer. Now, no matter the materials, the goals of the corsets during this time period right now were to flatten the waist and hoist the breasts up. Many had shoulder straps and flaps at the waist, and they were worn alongside a farthingale, which is those giant things that hold the skirts out at stiff shape. So like when you're trying to walk through a door, you'd have to turn sideways. Corsets were not hidden under additional layers at that time. Instead, they were worn proudly and made from beautiful fabrics with patterns and trim. And oh my gosh, I have seen some of the most gorgeous corsets.
Oh, yeah.
We'll have to do a little fashion photography dump in Instagram. So it was also the start of them being more rigid and more constricting. Corsets in the 17th century were mostly made from linen and bones with reeds, bents, or whalebones. And at that time, where a prominent bust was desired, corsets helped to accentuate the bust and put more emphasis on the décolletage. Important people of the era, such as Queen Mary II, Henrietta de Maria, and the wife of Charles I of England, are depicted in many paintings with fully bare breasts. So again, they were rocking the full breasts out, and it was...
I feel great about that.
Right? And it was regarded amongst the aristocracy and upper classes as a status symbol and a sign of beauty, which boobs are pretty,
Yep. I'm going with them on that.
So you feed kids with them too. So I mean they should be worshipped a lot more than they really are.
Well, also that's convenient. I mean, I
Right?
guess if you were an upper class woman, you weren't breastfeeding your own. But
Probably, sadly.
did you know, fun fact, that it is legal in New York City for me to go outside topless?
Nice. I think I did know that.
Because equal protection, and men can do it.
Also, the
So-
University of California, Santa Cruz campus, fully clothing optional.
That I knew because I dated someone long distance in Santa Cruz in college.
I love
back and
Santa
forth.
Cruz.
It was a whole thing.
A whole thing.
A whole thing.
So, corsets sometimes came with attached sleeves, which is weird for me to picture.
I thought you were showing
So,
me.
I was trying to move the cat. Sorry.
Attached.
Attached sleeves.
For everyone who can't see us, which is everyone, she just moved a cat across the screen.
Yeah. It's kind of like a side swipe version of The Lion King. So the lacing at this time also became super decorative, and that's when women started adding ribbons for extra accents. During this time, the corset had transformed into like a fabric bodice that was mounted on a heavily boned lining. So the front of the corset contained this long pointed busk, which was super rigid. The lower edge would have been tabbed, and it would have been laced in the back. From records, there are mentions at this point starting of health concerns for young girls that would start to begin the tight lace fashion that has now starting. So right at this point, tight lacing is starting. So 18th century, that's when the pain was brought. During this time, the corset was, again, super stiff, in which the rolls were closely stitched, encasing whalebone, cane, or hemp-like materials. Design itself was long-waisted. It was cut narrow back, wide front, shoulder straps, and the most fashionable stays pulled the shoulders back until the shoulder blades almost touched.
So they had fucking great posture.
Exactly. Talk about tits up on this, man. So the resulting silhouette, the shoulders are thrown back, super stiff, high and full bosom. That is characteristic.
So we're having an orgasm just walking around. That's
right. Right.
All right. Cool.
Again, they often included tabs formed by making cuts from the lower edge to the waistband that spread when on the body, giving hips more room and comfort. I guess if we're going to suffocate the top, we let the hips go free. So there's, plus for that. And again, they were highly decorated with finely stitched tunnels for boning and precious silk brocade, gold trims, things like that. Now, during the Age of Enlightenment...
they're beautiful.
Yeah. Oh my God. Insane. During the Age of Enlightenment, intellectuals began questioning the corset and its role, arguing that the corset was, at best, the physical body of censorship, and at worst, a way of deforming and destroying the natural body. And this is where anatomists and doctors began advising against the wearing of stays. At the same time, even young children wore them to encourage straight spines, and that includes boys. Boys stopped wearing them around the ages of 6 to 8, but then young girls continued to wear them on up into womanhood. Ultimately, though, corsets were pretty much the equivalent of the shapewear that we have today. Stiff and weird, but not super crazy pants. Yet. Enter the 19th century. So 1839, Frenchman by the name of Jean Wehrli made a patent for women's corsets made on the loom. And this type of corset was
woven corsets.
Woven, yeah. And it was popular until 1890 when machine-made corsets gained popularity. Before this, all corsets were handmade and typically homemade. Now, when people think of corsets...
so were most clothes.
Right.
All clothes, I guess, at this point.
Yeah, which is a skill we need to bring back, but that's a whole nother episode. So the image that comes to mind when you say the word corset is pretty much the 19th century corset, tight-laced, cinching the mess out of things. But surprisingly, the period of extremely tight lacing was only really popular like mid-19th century. So what's this tight lacing stuff I keep mentioning? Well, it's pretty much exactly as it sounds. It's pulling and tying the back laces as tightly as possible. And this started as some women wanted a more shockingly noticeable hourglass figure. I found an ad that I need to include in notes. It's an 1850s corset advertisement, and it ran 100 patterns for stays for ladies and 50 for children. 7 shillings for an 18-inch waist, rising 6 pence an inch. And according to the same ad, you could get a nursing corset for $1.75. Tune into our Patreon episode next week for more about that nonsense. But yeah.
Yes.
Also, just so I wanted to give a visual to anybody that was listening, just for like a reference. 18 inches is about the circumference of a honeydew melon. Yeah. Bitty, bitty waist. So, some women even...
Yeah. I mean, I'm a very small woman, and I have like a 25 or 26 inch waist.
You are small.
And, like, I don't get much smaller than that. So, ooh, I can't imagine.
Right? Well, some women claim they really loved the sensation of being laced so tightly, which I get. With them, it was...
Yeah, I'll get to that also.
It's like the lack of oxygen produces feelings of euphoria, but it also produces fainting spells. So 19th...
fainting couches.
So 19th century corsets might measure 18 inches fully closed, but you were supposed to keep a little room in the back open with the laces, kind of like when you tie your shoes, you know? A lot of rumors started popping up about whalebone academies, where young women's corsets were laced so tightly that their waists did not exceed 13 inches. But they're thought that those are rumors that were completely made up by guys who were just really turned on by the idea of a woman having a waist only slightly larger than a frickin' orange. So
13 inches, that's absurd.
Right. So, like, I did not go down the Whalebone Academy route.
I mean, I'm pretty sure that babies have larger than 13-inch waists.
Good Lord. So, now we're going to cruise on into the...
That's like my kitten.
Kitten corsets.
No.
So, now we're going to cruise into the 20th century. And that brought with it just quite a few changes. So, at this time... exercise, like biking, archery, golf, stuff like that, was being embraced by women. All of those were much harder to do if you were wearing a corset. And then World War I came, and it would also hinder women who were trying to help with the war effort, factory workers, nurses, anyone that just needed to bend over at the waist from time to time, pretty much. So, So by the time the war was over in 1918, new flapper fashions came around, and that didn't really require an hourglass waist.
No, you wore no bra and cami
right.
knickers.
So at that point,
or a chemise.
Corseted came kind of morphed into what we now know as the girdle. So I need to stress that corsets, tight lacing, waist training, all still widely practiced in some subcultures, and I am 1,000% here for it, as long as it's done wisely, because bodies have parts. Also, I do really love how, I don't know if I'm sure you've seen it, because we are such similar people. The piercings, the corset piercings in the back, where you get the rings down each side and then they string it together with... Yeah. At the same time, I look at it and I'm like, that's so pretty, though.
Yeah, it's beautiful, and then I want to pass out.
Right.
Like, it's... Which I guess, fainting couch. Corsets.
There you go. See?
There we are. Mm-hmm.
Full circle.
But yes, it's beautiful.
So that's my quick trip through the history on various... and it gets real detailed as to how long the busk was, and it would shorten and lengthen here and there. And then there's the whole waist, the corset belts. It's way broad. So, by all means.
Oh, yeah. Well, and there are different shapes for different eras, like the wasp waist corset.
Right.
That was really not a very healthy way for you to stand. Like,
right.
There are lots of, corsets. There are just so many.
Right. So that was broad, quick trip down.
Yeah.
The corset that is the stereotypical, what you picture, even Marilyn Monroe, Gone with the Wind, any, just corset.
Any Ren fair that you've ever been to.
Yes.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, that was good. I think that was a solid run-through of precisely what everybody imagines, I think.
I tried. Thank you.
Good job.
Yay.
Alright, so corsets also had an entirely different development path for different kinds of uses, although they weren't always called corsets. Often they were, but it's very hard to tell in historical writings whether they're using modern phrasing or whether they're using the phrasing that would have been used at the time. So I'm going to go over a sort of short history of the medical corset.
Ooh.
And how corsets were used in medicine. So probably most of us have seen a medical corset in action, even if we wouldn't have necessarily known that that's what it was, because scoliosis is pretty common.
Yes.
And scoliosis is one of the first applications of medical corsetry, and boy, did it take a journey. So, early scoliosis treatment in kids using corsets specifically started in the 1500s, which is earlier than I would have thought.
Yeah.
And apparently the person who was responsible for this was named Ambroise Paré, and he was a surgeon in the French army. And so his patients, which were, like I said, children, would wear a padded iron corset, which would have holes punched in it to reduce the weight, because carrying an iron corset would suck a lot. And so they were padded in a way that was meant to put pressure on the part of the spine that was seeming to be twisted or malformed. And so as the patient grew, the corsets would be changed as well, because, it would be a really bad idea to have a teeny tiny corset on a teenager. He did, however, though a decent amount of progress was made in treating something that was otherwise not necessarily treatable, there was a lot of pulling and traction and weird things before that. He also noted that his particular method wasn't successful after skeletal maturity was reached.
Yeah, okay.
Which I kind of get, although I would argue that it's probably just a lot slower.
Right.
And maybe people didn't live long enough.
Yeah, true.
So by the late 19th and early 20th centuries, iron corsets gave way to plaster casts, which were heavy and uncomfortable, but also removable. And they were apparently so cumbersome that sometimes they took like days to dry and harden. They were that thick.
Oof.
Yeah. And so I guess the only good thing about them was that they were highly, highly customizable because they were made on you.
Right.
And because you could take them off, because medical thought at the time included gymnastics and that as a treatment. And I assume that they're meaning gymnastics in the old school exercising way, not
no round off back
like
handspring.
Oh, I miss doing those. As an aside, listeners, I was a gymnast for 15 years, and so I did an awful lot of gymnastics that was more complicated than
Than stretching.
running around. So yeah, round-off back handsprings, although I preferred round-off back tucks
Yes.
as a start to a turn. But anyway, that is entirely unrelated to corsets. Although I suspect if you wanted to do a round-off layout, you could wear one.
Ooh, that might help.
And I've done a layout from the floor before, so I think you could. Anyway, not the point. So after that came what was called the Van Winkle corset brace. Yeah, just sit with that a moment. And I will leave a link in the show notes because there are pictures of the ones that I'm about to talk about now because we're moving into modern medical uses at this point, or starting to.
Okay.
So around 1919 is when the Van Winkle corset brace would have existed. And it's a textile corset, and it was also for treatment of scoliosis. But it was really specifically recommended for use only for immobilization after spinal surgery.
Okay.
Because at that time, like you said, doctors cited corset wear in young women as one of the major causes of scoliosis.
Makes sense.
And I mean, it wasn't, but
I could see how they went there.
yeah, so they thought that women of higher social classes who were more likely to have scoliosis, which is an interesting genetic thing that I'm sure one could take a deep dive on.
Mm-hmm.
They also had muscle atrophy on their dominant sides, or the twisting on their dominant sides created muscle atrophy on the other side. And so the Winkle corset brace I actually really like. It looks so comfortable, which is a weird thing to say about historical medical equipment. But it looks like a nice, solid, stable fabric backlace corset, but the straps pull your shoulders back and crisscross, causing stability across the shoulders. And it looks like I would love to wear it while sitting at my desk.
I'm looking at it now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's it looks sort of like posture correction devices, and a corset had a very, very literal baby. Just the exact combination of the two.
Right. It's appealing looking.
Yeah, like it looks comfortable. It looks supportive. It looks like something I would feel like
a hug.
Like held in by.
Yeah.
In a good way.
Right.
So, moving along. The Broadhurst Corset is next. And this is the one that you see in your nightmares.
You know, it doesn't sound as fun as a Van Winkle. I'm just saying.
No, no.
It's a very dooming name.
The metal frame with leather strap contraption that looks like you would find it in a particularly scary basement corner of an antique shop and or on a steampunk kit.
Oh.
So, yeah, it's definitely something. So, Bernard E. Broadhurst, who the corset is named for, wrote that spinal curvature could be corrected, and he wrote this originally in 1864. So sort of the Van Winkle and Broadhurst corsets were sort of overlapping, and so he thought that in order to correct certain curvatures, that you needed to have direct and opposing. Ah, my husband. And yeah, I'll just hold on for a second. Hi, Jeremy. I'm recording a podcast. Okay. Have some water. All right. So, where am I? Broadhurst thought that spinal curvature was something that was curable, and that doing so required pressure on specific areas in order to create an opposition of pressure to the place that was twisted.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you look at that style of corset, it will have like sort of weird padded areas attached to different places of it, and those would have been attached to the places where the pressure needed to be applied to the specific area of curvature to straighten it out.
So super personalized.
Yeah, I hope.
Yeah.
And so that actually was a pretty accurate way to approach scoliosis treatment,
Mm-hmm.
and is pretty much how it works today. It's not straps of metal and leather anymore. It's like fiberglass and very futuristic looking, but
Mm-hmm.
it basically is the same shape. Oh, hello, cat. Let me see. I got all confused when my spouse came home. Hold that thought. Okay. So the modern brace it's the Broadhurst brace's direct predecessor is called the Chenot brace, and it looks about 300% less steampunk than the Broadhurst brace, alas. But functionally, it is very clear that is where it came from and how it works. And so that, because scoliosis was one of the main things up until polio became a really strong issue, where you might need a medical brace, largely the history that I found was scoliosis specific. I'm sure that's not the only medical use.
But it's the most
it was
logical.
Certainly, yeah, and it was certainly used also for spinal injuries, back injuries. We all know Frida Kahlo's famously decorated corsets after her tram incident that would leave her injured for the rest of her life. And they were also used in different ways for polio patients before there was before there was a vaccine or any sort of treatment. So today, medical corsets are still used, largely for back support and posture improvement, but also for things like digestive improvement, because if you sit up straight, your intestines are not being pinched, and it can help your digestion, apparently, if that's an issue.
Seems legit.
Yeah, and the taller the corset, the more upright support it provides. And so different heights of corsets can be used for different medical needs.
Mm-hmm.
And the fitting for medical corsets is often the same for modern bespoke corsetry, which I will talk about later, because it needs to fit the curve of your natural spine.
Yes.
In order to be functional. You can't just get a ready-to-wear random corset and think that it's going to work out for you. And so, like, if you have certain body shapes, like lordosis, which is more commonly referred to as a sway back, I have that. The boning and actual tailoring of a corset needs to be very different so you don't hurt yourself.
Right.
And so it is supportive. So there are many ways that current medical corsets are used now. Scoliosis, as has been for a long time. The reinforcement for hypermobile joints. If you have, what is it? Something Danos.
Evie Oddly has it.
Yes. So does a friend of mine from school. But basically, hypermobility. Your joints hyperextend all the time, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yes.
It's the acronym is EDS, but I'm not sure how it's pronounced. So corsetry can really, really help the spine from dislocating.
That makes sense.
In people who are suffering with that. Osteoporosis stabilization and support in pain management is a use that I actually hadn't thought of.
Right?
And for postpartum women, although anybody can have this, but postpartum women often, or are the most common people who do, diastasis recti.
Yep.
Where your abdominal muscles are separated.
Mm-hmm.
You can use the compression of a medical corset to push them back together and support that area.
Yep, post C-section.
Yep, exactly.
Yep.
And apparently also they're used for compression therapy for anxiety.
That makes sense. Like a weighted
Yeah.
base, like vest rather.
Well, exactly. I mean, as someone on the spectrum who myself uses a weighted blanket sometimes, I can totally see. I mean, and my cat has a thunder shirt. It is exactly that.
Yeah.
And I am told by this article from the Lingerie Addict that it can also help menstrual cramps by providing strong pressure on the lower abdomen. But I don't know about you, but ain't nothing gonna fit me when I have PMS that fits me when I don't.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not going to get fitted for a corset.
Also, I don't want anything pressing that down there at that time.
No.
Like, that doesn't sound like fun. Like, a heating pad, I mean, if it had a built-in heating pad, like it was a heated, maybe...
Well, I mean, when you're building in the kitten pockets...
Oh, yes.
You could build in the heating pad pocket.
Oh, my God.
I mean, why not? It's your corset.
That's it. We're going to start a line of Bones and Bobbins, kitten corsets, built-in heating pad.
Yep. And can I just call, like, the cups of any foundation garment kitten pockets from now on?
Yes.
Because I want to.
Yeah. Nope. We're definitely going to kitten pocket something. Yeah.
Okay.
Nope. That's a thing.
All right. So that brings us up to date on, again, just a quick overview of medical corsetry because, like the fashion variety of corsetry, it's long and complicated, and there are about 1 million different offshoots.
There are. I remember growing up, my bestie, and we talked about joint besties with that were very Catholic. Her mom had back surgery, and she had a corset-like thing that she wore. And it was made out of like this molded plastic. So it looked incredibly uncomfortable. But she liked it. It worked for her. Like, I remember.
Oh, and that's what they look like now.
Just
like, that's what the modern, what the Broadhurst ones would become.
Right, and it makes sense. It's kind of the modern version of the plaster one because it molds to your, you can mold plastic now much quicker.
Yeah, and foam
right
inserts and things like that. Yeah, when I was in middle school, when we all got screened for scoliosis, a couple of people did have it and wore corrective braces for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Or even had back surgery and did that. And even now, like, the technology for that doesn't seem to have changed how it looks very much.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, yes, if it's not broke,
Exactly. And by how it looks, I don't mean that it does not do its job.
Right.
Correcting spinal issues, but that it sort of still looks kind of creepy old school doctory.
Yep. Nice.
Yeah.
So we've covered history.
Yeah.
We've covered medical. I wanted to take a moment to talk about some of my famous corsets. A couple of my favorites. Because corsets, like we mentioned, have not died out.
No. Not by a long shot.
No, not by a long shot. So in 1947, so where I left off on my last tale, World War I had changed styles to, for various reasons, mobility and also affordability, because fashion was a luxury at that point in time. The economy had changed. Now we're going to jump to 1947, which was only 2 years after the end of World War II.
Right.
So the French couturier Christian Dior presented a collection that symbolized not only a departure from the previous styles, but the beginning of a new society. So it's interesting how pivotal in fashion history the corset really is.
Yeah.
So he once again made fashion important. When his collection hit the runway in Paris on February 12th, 1947.
Oh, no, it isn't.
Huh?
Never mind. That is very, very, very close to the birthday of the also Catholic childhood best friend. But hers is the 11th, not the 12th.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Coincidences.
Yes, never mind.
So this collection would be deemed highly innovative by some and appalling by others. So the ones that loved it loved the fact that it was the direct opposite of the utilitarian clothing that was adopted pretty much as a uniform during wartime. This was sophisticated. It was very feminine. Dior didn't want to create everyday clothes for pragmatic women. He wanted to sell a dream of the good old days, when women could afford to be extravagant and deliberately glamorous. The new look was a rediscovery of prosperity, and women across generations and social classes adopted it happily.
Oh, but that's interesting. I'm looking at it right now, and it's also very modern looking.
It is. It's very modern, but he's taking the hip padding, the draperies, pleats, embellishments, all these other exaggerations.
I hope he didn't bring back panniers.
Well, in many's minds, it was regressive ideas, and many criticized Dior for taking away women's newly attained independence by lacing them back up in these corsets and making them wear long skirts again.
I think they look hot, but I understand.
Oh my god, I think
point.
The collection's amazing. Oh, amazing. But I get it.
I say as I have my sleeves roll up and I look like I just need a pack of cigarettes and I'm ready to be James Dean.
Little Rosie the Riveter wrap in your hair. During this story, I found another group of people that I didn't know existed, but would also like to hang with. So it was the little below the knee club. They literally called. And they staged a protest against the new look in Chicago with banners that said, "We abhor dresses to the floor. Women join the fight for freedom in the manner of dress." So they were real.
Wait, little below the knee?
Yeah, little below the knee club. So in
That's how I like my skirt lengths.
Right? So
Yeah.
I think we could hang with these people. Also, I put a link in for the reading. You can click on it. They're adorable. They are amazing. We would totally hang with them.
I'm excited.
So this caused a split in fashion. American fashion designers who embraced the modest, sleek silhouettes before and whose businesses blossomed during the war were also similarly appalled by Dior's design. Coco Chanel, the star of the pre-war fashion, even mockingly remarked that, and I quote, "Dior doesn't dress women, he upholsters them." So, this collection forever changed the history of fashion because no longer would there be one standard for all. Designers would design for practicality, some would design for glamour.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where like pret-a-porter and then, the shit people walk down the runway that will never be worn by anybody. They're just works of art, which are great works of art. But you look at them and like,
Sure.
I cannot grocery shop in that. So it's amazing to me that this corset, the corset again, it's never truly left the culture, and it's again gone to kind of divide things. Then
The little below the knee club is amazing. I am
Right?
looking at their pictures.
I
Walking down a runway. No, they must be walking. They're in New York City.
They are.
They must be.
There's
walking
in Chicago
in
too.
front of Bergdorf's maybe,
Mhm.
because I recognize the windows. I recognize the ironwork outside the windows. Wearing bathing suits, and is carrying a sign that says, "Do we need padding?"
Yep. Aren't they great?
And no, they don't.
No, they don't. They're great. I love them.
Oh my gosh.
Seriously, like, why they don't have a movie? I want a book. I want to know everything about these women.
Me too. I think we need to do an entire episode on these women.
I agree. I'm down for that.
I'm in love with them.
So, same here.
Yes.
So,
Anyway, sorry to interrupt. I just fell in
interrupt
love
away.
with them and needed to tell you.
Also, there's a whole nother group in our Patreon episode, too. Like, I found new heroes researching this. So, fast forwarding, like, another one of my favorites. So, 70s were a big year for me, favorite corset-wise. Because in the 70s, Vivienne Westwood began using corsets as part of her historic punk aesthetic. And she imagined corsets as empowering women rather than binding them. But my absolute favorite corset from the 70s was designed by Don Fuld. Don Fuld was an American costume designer. He was known for works on films like Spaceballs, Prizzi's Honor, The Great Race. In addition, he made the costumes for the action-adventure fantasy television series Wonder Woman, for which he was nominated for an Emmy Award in 1978. That's right.
Hell yes.
The Wonder Woman corset. And when
My mom handmade me a tiny, tiny version of it when I was a kid.
That is amazing. My parents bought me 7 pairs of Wonder Woman underoos, and I wore them.
Oh,
bitches.
I definitely had those.
I wore them everywhere. I ran around the backyard in them. I would try to wear them to the store, much to my mother's dismay. I would not take them off. 7 pairs.
I used to wear them in high school, but they only come in boys now.
No.
So I used to
There's
wear
a-
boys underoos.
There's an adult Wonder Woman underoos now.
Oh, heck yes.
Yes.
I just remember desperately looking for them because I wanted
Right.
matching underpants and tank top for whatever reason.
Because
And
fun.
I got Incredible Hulk underoos.
Ooh, that's another good one.
In high school.
Nice.
And Batman.
So good. So,
Anyway.
so Wonder Woman corset, iconic.
Yes.
And then, last but certainly not least, my favorite line of modern day corsets was the 1990s Jean Paul Gaultier collection created for Madonna's Blonde Ambition tour.
We all
just
know those.
Right.
Yeah.
Everything about them is sexy
and pointed
and amped up on power. Like, it just... So, fashion critic...
She's so badass.
Seriously. Fashion critic Susie Menks, in her introduction to the fashion world of Jean-Paul Gaultier, wrote, "His rebel with the corset moment was when runway and stage merged, bringing to a global public the vision of the bra that the designer had revealed first on the catwalk of the early 1980s. Madonna's message to the world when she had him create this was strapping oneself up have never looked so liberating. It was constructed from linen and combined this broad-shoulder tailoring of the era's corporate uniform with this seductive allure of the corset, and encapsulated his knack for working on the boundaries of oppositions, power and eroticism, masculine, feminine, boardroom, and bedroom." And that is pretty
Holy
much
shit. Mm-hmm.
like my favorite. Like, I think it's freaking sexy.
Yeah, and I think that really frames how at least our generation feels about corsets.
Yeah.
Like, there are very few things that make me feel more badass than walking into a room all strapped up.
Right.
Like, very few things. And I'm like, all right,
it's like
everything's in.
Right.
I'm ready. I'm in my battle armor.
Yeah, exactly. It's feminine
let's
armor.
Get shit done.
Which is why when people are like, well, Wonder Woman, like the new Wonder Woman movie, she still had the corset and the skirt and everything. And I was like, on one hand, yes, guys get these padded out outfits. On the other hand, she's so fucking badass. She doesn't need pockets. She doesn't need, all she needs is that's her armor, and that's what
Well,
she
and
needs,
the skirt makes sense.
Right.
I mean, you want to kick.
Right? So,
like range of movement.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I think there's something to be said for, like, wielding both your power and your sexuality.
Yes.
And having it be you who chooses how amped up to make that.
Yes.
That, like, there's something really, really intensely attractive about that.
Right. And it's also, you have control over how your body is perceived in a way that you don't with regular clothing, because you're changing the structure of it based on the style and the lacing and all. It is super empowering.
Yeah. I guess I didn't really remember until you brought it up that Madonna is totally where the modern idea of that began, and where that power came from again.
Right. She was unabashedly herself. She was very, I am a woman. I am gonna have my opinions.
I will use my sexuality to get what I want.
Right. And it's my right to. And
yeah.
And you didn't shame her for. Well, I'm sure there's people that did, but.
Oh, well, I mean, when she humped the stage in that wedding dress.
Her boy toy belt.
Some people got the vapors. Hello.
Hello. That was quite the hiccup.
That ended with got the vapors.
Which is about right.
Indeed. So, do you want to talk about modern corsets just a little bit?
Absolutely.
Alright, so much like every other part of this discussion, there's no way I can cover all of modern corsetry. But as someone who is a professional maker of things, I can talk about some different ways that modern corsetry happens, how bespoke corsetry works, and corsetry and cosplay, and why it's important.
Yes.
So, first off, you can make a corset if you can sew. Good luck with that, though, because, like, sewing a corset itself isn't hard. Sewing one that fits you is.
It's the tailoring.
Yes, and the boning, and getting the boning correct. And so, like, I have personally, have I sewn a corset? Yeah, I actually have sewn a corset top. But it was a very, very simple princess cut with relatively, like, only, I think, 2 or 4 places where there was boning. And nowadays, you can get, like, it doesn't have to be whalebone, and it doesn't have to be metal. You can get flexible plastic boning. So you have a little more freedom of motion. And so, if you're going to make a corset, you should know exactly how you want to use it. Like, if you're going to wear it as clothes, it wants to fit differently than if you're going to wear it as a foundation garment.
Yeah.
And so there are definitely books that show corset making techniques, and also I can recommend a few pattern fitting books that show where, like, wrinkles and pulls are, and the surprising places where things are too small or too big that make them. So the Complete Guide to Perfect Fitting is probably my go-to, and also Kenneth D. King's Smart Fitting Solutions. So before you try to make one, know how you want it to look, know how you want it to fit, and then experiment with the shape before you even think about boning.
Yeah.
Which is good advice for everyone, I guess.
I was going to say, you should always think before boning. At least
Yes,
minimally.
you should. It's true. Boning is a big decision. All right. So, in less dramatically well-fitted corset requirements, we've all seen Ren Fair cosplay corsets.
Oh, yes.
And they aren't usually boned. Some of them are, but they don't need to be. The point is that they have laced up.
It's the aesthetic versus
generally
the function.
speaking, the front.
Yeah.
And those are a lot easier to fit. I actually have a pattern for a steampunk TARDIS dress that is a lace-up corset and such. It also has a Dalek variation.
Nice.
But it's very much in the, like, cosplay genre of accessible making. And so that sort of covers if you wanted to approach making it yourself.
Yes.
You can certainly buy ready-to-wear corsets. Unless you have a very specific body type. They probably won't fit you particularly well, but you probably don't need them to. If, like, what you're trying to do is, say, take them off. You don't need it to fit very well if all you want to do is unlace it. But there's an entire world of bespoke corsetry, which professional corset makers are some of the best technical sewers that I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Because the small adjustments that need to be made to make something both completely second skin form fitting and also comfortable is incredibly difficult, and the detail work is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And so if you're going that route, expect to pay for it.
Yes.
Because you're definitely talking about someone who is going to measure you, fit you, make a muslin, fit that muslin to you, make a pattern to your specific specifications,
Yeah.
and then create a custom finished piece.
Which then includes all the hand detailing and I mean, it's amazing. It's just amazing to watch.
Yeah, and so the uses for that can be fashion. It can also be medical if you're looking for well-fitting support.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, leave the kittens alone. Jeremy, can you come get Mr. Big Stuff? He's yowling at the kittens. Can you hear him? Anyway. Thank you. The cat took one look at Jeremy and ran the other way. So you can get them for fashion, you can get them for medical reasons, or you can get them as foundation garments for either period clothing reenactment or just everyday wear, or for shape training or waist training, which is a thing that people still do. It's a thing that needs to be done responsibly.
Right.
But it's absolutely still part of the culture and custom of corset design.
Yes.
And so I found the same person who wrote the article on medical uses is a bespoke corset maker. And
I found it interesting how many articles, like how much information about corsets that I found weren't directly on like a news site, but more on like fashion designer, costume construction, on individual sites like that.
Yeah, and that's exactly where I found that information too, although there are links to a bunch of primary sources which are helpful if you want more information. But I will leave a link to the person who wrote that article, her bespoke corset shop, because there's an FAQ and just a bunch of information on corsets and different kinds of corsets and different shapes and why you would have different shapes and different uses. I'm trying to remember the different kinds that you could get. Waist training and tight lacing is a specific kind of corset.
Yes.
Ribbon corsets are a specific kind of corset. Knit corsets are a specific kind and construction of corsets. There's also integrating corsets into custom clothing. So I definitely, I have made a dress for the Emmys when my husband has been nominated, and I built in construction into the top so I wouldn't have to wear an undergarment with it.
Nice.
And so that is part of that.
You're so fancy.
It's so fancy. Sewing that dress was the worst idea I've ever had. And there's also the Gibson girl silhouette, which people will recognize when they see it.
Yeah.
There's a much shorter minx design silhouette. There are just a lot of variations, and this person seems to have some pretty fantastic information. Ooh, the kittens are riled. And hold on, I'm trying to find her name since I've been talking about her.
I should remember, before we post this, I will grab the link.
Marianne Faulkner.
Ah, okay.
Is the name of the person who both wrote the medical article and has the corsetry line of her own.
Nice. There's an episode of the Try Guys where they all go in and get fitted for corsets and wear them for a weekend. And of course, Eugene, being the fabulous creature he is, fucking rocks it like nothing. He wore it to Pride with his own outfit, and it's amazing. But it was an interesting video. I'll have to link it in the show notes.
Yeah, I should say that corsets aren't just for women.
Yep, I forgot to mention that as well.
Yeah, men also wear corsets, medical corsets, often for back support and back injuries, and you can also get specifically tailored for men corsetry for daily posture correction, and it seems to be kind of a lovely, like, very comfortable thing.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently a lot of people, once they get laced into an actually fitted corset, end up feeling relief because it's taken so much pressure off of a lot of areas and given them a lot of back support.
Which I fully understand. I know we talked a lot about boobs, but I'm going to bring it back around to boobs again.
We're talking about corsets.
I remember I had, like, sometimes boobs are just heavy, but bras are not comfortable. And I had a partner who used to like to stand behind me and just hold them up for me. And it felt...
That's so nice.
Right, like, he was a total boob guy. But it felt so comforting. Like, he was taking the pressure of lugging them around. He was happy. I was happy. I didn't have to. It was, but that.
Oh, yeah.
I relate that to, just that, taking the pressure off of having to lug your own boobs around or not sit right or just having an assistive device that.
Indeed.
Helps you feel more confident or feel more comfortable, or both.
Ooh, you smell like chamomile. Yeah, so I think that is pretty much all I have to say on modern corsetry, because there's so many ways to do it. Like, so much fashion information out there, so many people doing really interesting things, that I think if you have a specific area of interest, you should really take your own deep dive into it.
Definitely.
Yes, please don't pull the cord out of my microphone, Mr. Big Stuff. Jeremy, please come get Mr. Big Stuff. I'm just holding the cat still, so he doesn't take the cord out. And I guess my spouse did not hear me. Ooh, ow. He's sharp. Alright, so, yeah. Shall we... Oh, weekly worst way to die.
That does. That brings us to the weekly worst way to die. I didn't put much thought in that. Can't think of a corset-related death.
Well, I can certainly think of a corset-related death, but, I think this week's worst way to die is the scornful look from Mr. Big Stuff whenever he remembers that the kittens are here.
Ooh,
That is my worst way to die this week. See,
that is
also
a good
my
one.
most likely way to die.
That, you know what? That's a good one and highly relatable. Given our puppy acquisition and cats.
Yeah.
I am gonna say that my weekly worst way to I had a hornet in our house. And
no.
I did. It was on it was on my microphone. I took a picture of it.
Oh yeah,
and it
no.
was super sleepy, and I totally ushered it out of the house. But I cannot imagine being stunned to death by hornets. I think that would be a completely sucky way to go. Because enough of them, you're going to go anaphylactic no matter what, whether you're allergic or not. You get enough of those stings, you're going to go down. And that would not be fun or glamorous.
No, it just reminds me of my girl.
My girl.
I wanna.
Yeah.
He can't see without his glasses, and then I'm gonna cry about it.
Yes. Oh, God,
right.
yes.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
let's not.
Cats and hornets.
Cats and hornets. Well, that is a thing.
That is a thing.
Let's not do either of those things.
That's a pinky promise on my behalf. I'm good with that.
Hear, hear.
So, listeners, do you want to be our spooky internet friends?
Of course they do.
How could they not? You can
Right.
find us on bonesandbobbins.com. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Also, Bones and Bobbins.
Mm-hmm. And don't forget to rate and review this podcast because it pleases the internet gremlins. And that is how we show up in recommendations so other morbid souls can find us. And don't you want them to find us?
We need all the morbid souls that we can get.
It's true, we're using them to power something big. I wasn't supposed to say that.
And on that note, let us leave you with some advice that you should never forget. Lock your doors.
And don't run with scissors.
Huzzah! Each episode of the Bones and Bobbins podcast is written and researched by Haley Pearson Cox and Natali Hoyce. Our music was composed by Loyalty Freak Music. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Bones and Bobbins. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, follow us on Spotify, or check us out wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts so you won't miss a minute of our strange and creepy content.